Okay, good day students. In this video we're going to cover how you would go about exporting all the work you've done in other software. Now most of you would have done your apartment layout, so I've shown you this is a brief example how I've created a plan and I've created a section and how we're going to use this information in Blender. Okay, so the first thing I have noticed what we might have to do with this file is actually get it ready to export. Now if you've done a whole lot of text and added a whole lot of additional information, sometimes you don't want all of that going through to Blender. So maybe we need to be a bit selective of what needs to go through. So the first thing I have found, if you go to layers, we need to add a new layer, a new model environment. So we're going to add a new model canvas. Okay, I'm going to call this export. You can delete this once it's done, because once it's done its job, you don't have to do this. But maybe this is a good workflow to keep exporting things. Okay. Now, this is something that I have picked up with helping some of you in the studio. If you switch on wireframe and you say show grid, now this is very hard to see, but there is an origin in there's a little green dot that appears. You don't see it straight away, but if you get to a certain zoom, you'll see there's a green dot. Now technically this is the origin of this file, and this is quite important when you want to export stuff to Blender, so things are not very far off the canvas, but there is a trick that we can do in Blender to fix this as well. Okay, so I just want you to make aware of it. So if you are having this error, you might find that this project is very far from the origin. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is copy everything. Control C. So Control C, and if you look at my keystrokes, Control V. So I'm going to paste everything and then delete all the annotation objects. You could also go and delete the fills and the zones if you don't want that information to come through. So like these zones and these dividing lines for the zones. So you might want to delete that information before you take it through to Blender, because it just means you've got less work to clean up in Blender. But it doesn't matter if you don't want to and you want to leave all this information, then I'll show you as I export this. A lot of you also might have construction lines, so I'm just going to demonstrate this. So you might have some construction lines in the file. Okay, so these can be quite annoying. So I'm just going to put some construction lines for now. Okay, so if I go and export this now, menu, export, and we're going to export this as a DXF. Okay, so I'm going to export this. It'll say downloading. We're going to download this. And I've made a folder on my desktop where I'm going to be working, but please try and keep all this information in one folder on your machine or on a OneDrive. I would strongly recommend that you have a drive where this is getting backed up so you don't lose all your work. I have noticed by default the file names are very long, so just remove the information that you don't need, but make sure that you maintain the .dxf. I don't think it's required because it'll probably, okay, it's telling you it's going to make a DXF in any case, so you don't have to worry about that. And it's adding that in any case. So we're going to download this as microapartment.dxf. I'm going to overwrite that file. It was just a test that I was running. Okay, so we've downloaded our DXF file. So we can shut down Rayon. Okay, this is a typical workflow. You can bring it in from SketchUp. There's another plugin that I'll give you part of the video series. If you want to download SketchUp files and use SketchUp files, by all means you can do that. There's a whole library of SketchUp models that you can use as well. Okay, so launch Blender. Please, you'll notice that I'm using 4.5 LTS, so long-term support version. I think all of you, this is going to be a better workflow for all of you, because in my previous video I showed you how to set up this version. Okay, so in the project we can get rid of the cube. Now what I recommend we do is, you'll see that there are collections. I'm going to rename this to, so I might want to rename this to camera. Let's just rename this to camera and lights. Okay, camera lights. I'm just going to make sure that when I'm working with this information I can manage it. The next thing we're going to do, this is very important, first set up your scale and your units. This is very important as well, so make sure that we're working with millimeters. The rest we can leave and make sure that it's 1. Okay, very important. So I'm going to leave this just like this for now. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to go to File, Import, and we're going to go and import this DXF file. So you make sure that this AutoCAD DXF file, this option is available. If you haven't, please watch my previous video where I cover how to get this set up correctly. So I'm going to go and say Import DXF. So I'm going to go to desktop, workshop, apartment. Okay. So now there's some settings that we need to kind of stick to when we are going to import these. So I've saved the file, and now in your settings, make sure that you switch off import text. We're going to switch off repeat line thickness and merge by attribute. And we're going to make sure there's a new collection, and we're going to set the unit. And we're going to simply go and click import. Okay, you should see that this will try and import all of this information in a container. So these are containers, by the way. So in the scene, you can make new containers. And I'll discuss that in a minute when we start modeling more information. But you'll see that it's brought this in as, let's try to bring everything in, and everything has come in as different lines. Okay, so we don't need the line thickness, we don't need the text. So if we go to top view, now the best thing we need to do, or the best workflow you should adopt, is try and measure something that we know, so that we know that this is to scale. So we're going to use the measure tool. At the top of your screen, you're going to enable snapping, and you're going to make vertex, enable vertex, and you can hold shift down to select face or edge. So this is quite neat. It allows you to have multiple snap modes available while you're working. So I'm going to go and measure something that you can lock it on X and Y, by the way, so you can lock it on Y. So I'm going to measure to there. So my apologies, let's just take this back. Started a new command, so look at on X. So let's just delete this, sorry, let's get delete that as well. Let's start here and drag down, lock it on X or Y, and I'm going to try and snap it to the end here. So you see, once I've snapped, it's 100 mil, and I know that I drew at 100 mil in rayon. Okay, so I know that this is to scale. Okay, so I know that this is to scale. The next thing we need to understand is that we've got two parts. We've got two parts to this. We've got a section, and we've got some plans, and we've got some construction lines. So we can start getting rid of information that we don't need. So if I select these objects, for example, and I press tab on my keyboard, you can enter edit mode. Okay, so these objects you can edit. You can enter edit mode, so I can see that these objects are very long, and I think that's part of the issue. So I'm going to delete these vertices. I'm going to delete these vertices as well. Okay, so there's probably some hidden geometry that I don't know about. It's probably got something to do with the door, but that's fine. I can see there's probably something wrong with this door that's come from round, but that doesn't matter because it's very easy to fix this information once we've got it all into Blender. The next thing I want to do is actually move all the information to the right location. So I want to move everything to the origin to help us modeling. Now a lot of these objects will have parent lines, so don't worry about that for now, because we're going to extract the information that we need, and we're going to use very little of this contextual information. So this micro apartment, what we do like about containers, we can control what we see very quickly. Okay, instead of going to individual objects, which takes a whole lot of time, you want to use a container, and you can go and say select objects, and we can move everything that way as well. So we're going to use the move command. Now with the move command active, you can see it at the top here. I'm going to lock it on the XY axis. I'm going to press B for base point, so it's asking for a base point. I'm going to select that as my base point. Now this is hard to get it to the origin, so how do we do that? So what I might do now is remove. I want to switch on grid, and I'm going to have grid and vertex active, so it means when I move this information again. Now sometimes if you want to move an object, you press G on your keyboard, and you need to press Shift X and Y to log it on. So by using this, you can lock it on a plane. So you just need to understand, you see at the bottom, if I go, so Shift Z, you can see we can lock these things on a plane. Okay, X, Y, Z. Okay, so we're locking it on the Z plane in essence. So if I move this up, and it allows you to go off the screen, which I do like. So if I go B for base now, so it'll ask for a base point, so set base point. Okay, I think that's not on, so just make sure. So I want grid and vertex. So I'm going to go to G, B for base point. Okay, so I can snap this information Okay, if it is being strange, you'll see it's quite easy to sort out. So grab this again. I'm going to go for B for base point. I'm going to select this point and it'll snap to the grid. Okay, so very quickly I'm able to move this right on the origin. Okay, so this is the first part of the equation. We need to get this stuff on the correct equation or location. Yeah, so you want to get all this information on the right location. And this does help with modeling information going forward. Okay, now you'll see that objects are being put into different categories. So the way the layers were structured. So what we can start doing now is we need to start cleaning up this file for us to start modeling. Okay, so in the next video I'll cover how we model things step by step, but in essence we just have to do a bit of management of the file so that when we work going forward, things are a lot easier to work. You're putting objects in collection, so it allows you to switch them on and off very quickly, etc. So this first one I'm going to call this shell. So this is going to be the outline of the building. So what this allows me to do is I can select just the walls. So I'm holding down Shift. Shift allows you to select multiple objects. So I want this information for now. So I'm going to go Control C. I'm copying, and then in shell I'm going to paste. So I'm going to paste this information. So I've made a duplicate. So what it allows me to do now very quickly is switch off this information in apartments. So now I've got duplicates, and you can see it's got a .001. Now, in order to start converting this information and using it correctly, we need to convert this information into meshes. At the moment they're curves, so you can see this icon is telling you these are curves. We need to convert these into meshes. You can simply select them in the outliner, right click in the view, and you can see a lot of the menus or commands that relate to certain objects in Blender will always be available if you right click. So if you right click, you can see join, convert to. A lot of these menus will be available. You can also see you're getting the same menus or same objects or same commands over here. Now you've just got to understand that Blender is quite a complex bit of software. So if you had to have little commands for everything around your screen, the screen will be too full of commands. But these are workflows. These are very typical workflows if you start doing this type of modeling. Okay. And the big difference between Blender and something like SketchUp or Revit and that, Blender's a clay modeling tool. So it's a free modeling tool. So it uses vertices, edges, whereas other software like Revit and ArchiCAD and Rhino, they're all using maths to put a model together. Yes, you are driving things by shape to a degree, but there's a lot of maths involved, where this is a total opposite. This is more like a sculpting tool. So if you're going to sculpt with clay, it's more of a, you can work very accurately in Blender, but it's a different workflow. But Blender is more of a free modeling tool. And I think this is a great tool if you're just planning a building and pre-design. You're not being accurate yet, you're just putting a concept together quickly. This is where the software shines. Okay, so I've got these two objects together. I can simply now grab all of them, right click and join. So I can join them and make them one object very quickly. The next thing I can do is click them again and right click. I'm going to convert all of these to a mesh. Okay. Now once we've got everything as a mesh and we press tab on our keyboard, you'll notice that we've got a whole series of points and edges. So there's a bit of information that we don't need at this point of time. Okay, we need to separate those, for example, but we need to clean up the walls for a bit. Okay, so something that I have picked up that comes through from Rayon, you notice that some of these edges or the room separator lines or zone lines come through as well as part of the walls, and some additional information comes through because they weren't put on the correct layer. But this is very easy to address. Okay, so the first thing I would start doing is, you'll see that I've got an edge line here, and if I hover over this point or edge and I use the edge selection mode, so at the top here we've got different modes, but on your keyboard it's 1, 2 and 3. So if I hover over this and I press L, it'll select the linked objects. So I can simply delete that, delete the vertices as well. So that's a linked object. If I press L now, that's a linked object. Click away, L. So those are linked. So there's a bit of there's some holes in the geometry that we need to sort out as well. So if I go L, okay, so how do we fix that? So I'm starting to get rid of some of the linked information that I don't need. So let's see, sorry, just hover again. So L, delete vertices. You want to delete the vertices. So go L again, yep. Delete vertices, L again. So it'll try and find all the linked information. Alternatively, I can just go to vertex mode and I can simply select all the vertices and delete them. Now, we have to switch on X-ray mode because we're not seeing all the information, because there might be a vertex on top of the vertex. Okay, now this is where some software does get messy. So let's switch on our scene statistics and I'll explain. If I select all of these vertices, Blend is telling you there's 11 of 167 vertices that you've selected. Okay, so I think the first thing we need to do is get rid of the redundant vertices. So you're going to press A on your keyboard, which means you're going to select everything, or you can simply select all of the vertices. Now if you right click, we're going to use the merge vertices command by distance. Now you can see it's got rid of 42. Now we can set the tolerance. So this is quite handy. You can simplify this mesh quite a lot if you understand how this works. But for now, I wanted to merge all of the redundant, and you can see it's got rid of quite a few. So it says 125, 125. So we've got rid of a whole bunch of vertices, which will mean now, if I press L on this thing, on this arm now, it's merged all of those vertices and created a closed loop of. So think of it as when you're working in Inkscape, when you're creating a closed path or a closed shape, it will fill it correctly. So this is all we're trying to do in Blender. We're just trying to make sure that all of these paths are closed, so when we start the modeling phase, this gets a lot easier to work with. Okay, so that's worked quite well. And if I go link here, you can see it's linking all the right information. Okay, there are some redundant information that we need to get rid of, but it's something that we'll sort out later. So I don't need those vertices anymore, and I don't need those vertices anymore. Doesn't matter if we lose some information, because the plan will help us. I'm just using this as a height and a height for my windows and doors. That's all I'm going to do with this information. I've got a door frame here, so I can maybe get rid of this information, delete those vertices. Okay, the rest I'm happy to keep. Okay, so very straightforward, very straightforward. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to separate this information from this information, because this is my plan, this is going to be my section. So with these vertices selected, again I can right click and I'm going to go and say separate. So I'm going to separate this, separate selection. You'll see it'll duplicate and create a whole new mesh. Press tab to exit edit mode. So now we're going to have, and we can rename these now, I'm going to have this as a plan. And we're going to have this as a section. So this will become our section. So you only need one section for this. So if you're exporting this information, you can just have one section available. And now we can move this information as we need to. Now, one last little trick I want to show you, especially with working with this information. If I press tab mode now, each object in Blender has an origin. Each object has an origin, and this is quite an important point, because it allows you to move things away and bring them back and realign them to certain locations. So what I need to do is I need to fix this location for this geometry. So I'm going to press tab, I'm going to enter edit mode, and I'm going to select this vertex that we've moved right on our origin of the project file. I'm going to use Shift S. So Shift S, what this does is it'll move your cursor to a selected point. Okay, so it means that my cursor has been moved. So if I go to this point and I go Shift S, cursor to selected, you see it'll move the cursor to this point over here. So go back here, Shift S, cursor to selected. Now in your project, you do have, if you go into these commands, you just have to go and find. So these commands are available, they're just quite deep to find. Okay, so if you're going to say snap to, okay, so there's a whole lot of these commands in here that you can use to move this information to the right location. Okay, but I would recommend, so if you go to cursor, so what you could do is you could also snap it that way. So this is another way to do it, and make sure that these are on, so you can also snap to the right location. So that's very handy. Just understand that your cursor, if you go to view settings, that this can adjust. So you'll see that the cursor is moving. It's hard to see at the moment, but you'll see that it is rotating. Just use your backspace command to make sure that these are always set to 0. So you can move the cursor by using this option as well. You can simply select the cursor tool and then move it to wherever you want to. If you press Shift Spacebar, you get a whole lot of other commands as well that you don't have to keep. Okay, so this blend is quite interesting. You can set it up to work in any way, but it takes a bit of practice to kind of get the hang of it. But just understand that you can set your cursor by using the snap tools as well. You don't have to use the Shift S. Okay, so there's just a shortcut on how to do this. So once I've got my cursor in the right location, I'm going to exit edit mode. I'm going to right select on the object, the current selected object. I'm going to right select. I'm going to say set origin to 3D cursor. So what this will do, it'll move the origin of this file to this location. I'm going to do the same with my section. So I'm going to go and say move this information. What I do like about, you can do this outside of edit mode. I just wanted to show you how you can snap the cursor to a selected object as well. So I'm going to move that 3D origin or 3D cursor to this location. Go to select mode, right click on this object, set origin to 3D cursor. So this origin is set over here, and this is set over here. Okay, so why do we want to do this? If I move this object now outside of edit mode, you'll see that that origin becomes a point of, so if I want to move this now and I want to move this accurately, it gives me a point by which to rotate and move by outside of edit mode. So this is very important to understand because that's its origin or individual origin. So that's the origin of this file now. So I can move it to this location, and I can go to, if I go to 3D view and I switch around, I can use the rotate command. I can rotate this object now by 90 degrees. So that means if I move this information, if I move it now and I move it on the x-axis, remember if you've got your grid snapping active, it'll snap onto the grid, and if you hold control down, it will snap at much smaller increments. Okay, if you look at the top here, while you're moving information, it will show you by how much it's moving. Okay, you can get very accurate with this. So I do like how that works. Okay, so that's very neat how that works, how you can work quite accurately. But by default, it'll try and snap on a major grid every time. So that's quite cool to understand. But this information will, and you're going to use this as a reference when we start extruding our plan. Okay, so now that we've got our origin set up, now we can start working on this project. We can start extruding, we can start creating the shell of the building. Okay, so my next video, I'll cover how we go about doing that. Thank you.